Where does your school stand in terms of designing, implementing, and measuring the effectiveness of its whole school wellness program? Several of our thought leader guests have told us that wellness is at the top of the to-do list for many international schools. Along with wellness, another reoccurring topic in our episodes is change management, especially around the development of new programs. We hear stories about initiative fatigue and the dropping of programs when their champions leave the school. With so much talk around wellness and change management, we decided to invite Alison Leathwood on the show to share an overview of how to design and implement a school-wide wellness program that is sustainable. Our guiding question for this show was, how might international school leaders approach the development of a school and community-wide wellness program based on positive psychology? Alison offered such a detailed framework, along with so many practical strategies, that it is futile to try and summarize them here. So I will share just a handful of the topics to whet your appetite for designing an effective wellness program at your school. Here they are. Using a positive psychology approach to wellness, leveraging character strengths and the PERMA pillars, the who, what, when, where, why, and how of implementing a wellness program, other factors that will affect the success of your wellness program. Check out our show notes to learn more about Alison's career in health, PE, and coaching. Also look to visit the stories section of our information hub to watch Alison's Going Global story. This episode was recorded on February 24th, 2025. Join us now to explore a wellness program building toolkit filled with tools shared by the creative, determined, and delightful Alison Leathwood.
Hi, Alison. Welcome to Educators Going Global. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much for asking me to be with you.
Absolutely. So, where in the world are you?
I am currently sitting in the middle school library in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, in the international school that I work in.
Fantastic. So you have a whole podcast set up there, which is really fun. We don't often get people on who are really prepared like that. So your preparation has been second to none. Fantastic. We usually start with asking our guests to share a Going Global story related to our guiding question. Have you got one for us today?
I do. Yeah, my Going Global story was, now I've been in this country or in this school for 11 years, which I can't believe, 11 years at the same school. And in the first year that I was here, I noticed that we didn't really have much of a formalized health curriculum. Now I'm a high school physical education and health teacher, so I figured that there would be something documented, and there wasn't yet. And our curriculum leader at the time asked me if I would be willing to go to a conference in Shanghai to learn about how wellness programs are being implemented in international schools. And coming out of Canada to teach overseas, when someone asked me, could you go to Shanghai for a professional development, I thought that was the craziest thing to me, that I would actually travel to another country and get to do PD. So I, of course, said yes, and I was incredibly excited, and it was all paid for and covered, everything down to my taxis, going even into the city to do some tourist stuff. So it was incredibly exciting, and then also unbelievable what I was able to learn and the people that I was able to connect with over that weekend, and got to learn to see what was happening at the school that was hosting, as well as what other schools were doing to implement health in a really intentional way, what curriculum they were using, what resources they were finding helpful that they could adapt to the international context, because many of the curriculums being used, as an example, OFIA out of Ontario or Shape America Health Standards, they're very tailored to a North American lens. And so I was learning just about what things were really important in those curriculum, and then what did really need to be adapted to a more international and Asian international community. So that was very eye-opening, and it honestly was the thing that for me really started to spark this passion and interest around wellness and well-being. And, I came as just a PE teacher of health, and, eventually I've been able to impact a ton of change within my current school. And the following year, I was able to document and articulate a health curriculum for the middle school and high school and resource it, as well as start a house leagues program in our high school to develop community, as well as I also worked with our new principal to kind of redefine what our advisory program was. And we started this journey to develop a better pastoral care advisory program. And a lot of it came from the ideas and the networking that I got from this very first sort of international PD that I got to do.
That's a fantastic story and directly related to our guiding question, so well done you. And I am going to just go on record saying how envious I am that you got to do that. As a health and PE teacher for 25 years of my 30-plus international teaching years, I'm quite envious that you got to actually go to a wellness/health and PE kind of a conference, because I think I did do that once, and it was really, really invigorating and just great to network with people who are doing the same thing as you. But often, I've been part of creating health and PE programs, and you do feel like you're in a bit of a silo. So that whole piece of getting out there and hearing what other people are doing, and I am not surprised at all that your mind was totally blown by it. So thank you for sharing that wonderful story.
So what excellent modeling, not only of character strengths, but also of what it's like to get that enrichment and then bring it to your school and then take those action steps. And that is a theme that comes up in a lot of our episodes that our guests talk about. So thanks for sharing that, Alison. So let's jump into our guiding question. And like we always do, we always ask really big ones. And that's why we asked you to be on the show. So here's the question. How might international school leaders approach the development of a school and community-wide wellness program based on positive psychology? So like I said, super huge question. You could spend hours sharing with us and our audience, but that's not really what our focus is today. We want to give kind of an overview, your blueprint, to give people a taste for what the development of a wellness program can look like. And we would say to our listeners, if you want to learn more, reach out to Alison. We'll have her contact information. Bring her to your school and get working. All right, so let's go to starter question in a definition. What is a positive psychology approach to wellness?
Thank you, David. So positive psychology is a scientific approach to studying human thoughts, feelings, and behavior with a focus on strengths instead of weaknesses. It's about building what can be called the good life. I'm using quotes, although the guests can't see that. Instead of repairing the bad and taking the lives of average people up to great, instead of focusing solely on moving those who are struggling up to normal. So what I really like, or how I like to sum it up in a more succinct way, is that looking what is right with you, not what is wrong with you, and helping individuals to build coping strategies while you are already well. It's kind of that proactive approach, right? Usually in psychology research, it was all about when people were already unwell, how can we help and how can we fix them? But what if we took individuals who are already well and coping well and just gave them tools and strategies that they can then self-manage when things kind of don't go their way or there are certain challenges that come up in your life?
And that harkens back to us that took psychology in college, and it was all mostly abnormal psych. That's what you studied, what was wrong with people. So the scientific basis of this came out of the University of Pennsylvania. And the ultimate goal is to flourish. But you wouldn't put pressure on yourself to say, I'm not flourishing. What's wrong with me? Like so many things in life, it's a process that you're working on. And I really appreciate your definition.
Yeah, and it also puts me firmly in mind of life coaching, because that's basically how we distinguish life coaching from therapy, is taking people who are already doing just fine and coping just fine and working with them to help them optimize their life through wellness and resilience building and so on, versus people who are struggling just to get to as you say, at kind of a normal level, normal again in air quotes because we don't want to be stigmatizing anyone, but from just surviving to thriving. And so that's what life coaching is all about as well. So you've really resonated with me there with that definition. So when you look at positive psychology, and David has talked about this in the past, so our listeners will be probably familiar with the acronym PERMA and with the idea of character strengths. Those are some of the main components of positive psychology, so let's take a closer look at those.
All right.
First of all, what are character strengths and what might they look like being exercised, as we say, by students, staff, parents, and so on?
All right, so character strengths are positive qualities that contribute to a person's well-being and the well-being of others. They're not just those sort of fleeting feelings, but rather they're that deep-seated dispositions that influence how we think, feel, and act. And I am aware there are different surveys, there are different types of categorizing these character strengths and what we might have. In my experience, I've always used the VIA, or Values and Actions Character Strengths Profile. This is the one that's also used by the Positive Education Institute, which I've worked with quite closely and will continue to talk about later on in the podcast with what we've been using at my current school. And so there is a survey that you can take, and it basically has as a foundation 24 character strengths that we all have within us. And depending on what's happening in our life, we're going to maybe dial up or dial down different character strengths to help us to not just deal with challenges and solve problems, but also when things are going well, which character strengths are going to help bring us joy and whatnot. And these character strengths are categorized in 6 different areas, and what they call core virtues. And so one of those being wisdom of knowledge, and character strengths that would fit into that area are things like love of learning and perspective. You've got courage, character strengths like bravery, perseverance, one of my favorites, zest. I love to dial up my zestiness every time I get into a PE class. We also have then humanity, and so that's things like love and kindness. You've got justice or fairness and leadership, temperance with character strengths like forgiveness and humility, transcendence with character strengths like gratitude, spirituality, appreciation of beauty. And again, what I love and really want to emphasize is that we all have these 24 character strengths that we can utilize at any time. One consultant that we worked with, he kept talking about how we have a toolbox of character strengths. And then when something happens, let's say I might know that a friend is struggling and I want to provide them with some kindness, or I want to, help to bring them some joy, I might buy them a coffee. So I've gone into my toolbox, I've pulled out my kindness character strengths, and then I've utilized it. So we have all of these strengths. Now, as humans, though, we do have 6 character strengths that we call our signature strengths that we are just naturally drawn to, ones that come to us just a lot more easily. Again, we have all 24. It's not that these are the only 6 that I'm good at and I'm bad at the other ones. I always have to clarify a lot with students when we do this survey, and then it tells them that these are their 6 signature. They think, oh, well, then I'm really bad at appreciation of beauty because it was last. It's like, no, that's not something that you naturally tap into. When the time is right, you'll be able to dial up that one strength. So I think the last time I did my character strength survey, I had leadership, love, perspective, perseverance, gratitude, bravery. But also every time I've done the survey, it always had different results. I did it once during COVID, which had very different results than when I did it when I was not in a lockdown. So depending on our situation, these things can change.
I really appreciate just some of your terminology because they're action-oriented, exercising, dialing up, and then having just this general framework. So much of what we do in teaching is providing frameworks so that kids can make sense, whether it's in language arts, social studies. And one of the things I like about positive psychology is the framework. And then you start using the character strengths, and we'll talk about PERMA in a moment. But then we use language, just as you're saying, about how we bring it into our lives. So let's say a school is trying to do an integrated approach into the regular curriculum. What might the teacher do to bring the character strengths in a language arts class or a social studies class, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you said that integrated approach. Sometimes with a lot of wellness or well-being type of activities, We leave them in an advisory or a homeroom or a wellness block, and then we don't actually look at ways that it relates. And so the students think that that's the only time that I would ever talk about character strengths. And, I think when we started to educate teachers around this, that was a big message that was being sent out, is getting teachers to critically think, how could they incorporate it? And I know it was always English teachers talked a lot about when they're analyzing a piece of writing to have the students do some strength spotting with the different characters. And so breaking down, this character in this story, in this scene, potentially, right now they're engaging in their perseverance. And sort of what does that look like and what are they doing and how do you know that you can identify that it's perseverance? Same thing happening in social studies, humanities, especially when you're looking at history and you might be looking at different dictators or political or war-related decisions that leaders are making. I know teachers have been asking sort of the similar questions. Well, what strengths are you noticing are happening? Or what challenges might this political figure be facing? What character strengths do you think that they could be dialing up or working with now? So I really think that there's a lot of ways that you can connect it, but it is just all about having the teachers feel comfortable with the language, and that then when I'm comfortable with it and I'm practicing a lot in professional development sessions or in grade level team meetings, that then it becomes a bit more natural and I start to think about it. And then I just feel that so many more opportunities will kind of open up. I know for us in physical education, we do what's called an Energize Your Life journal, where students have an activity journal that they fill in every week. And then we also added sort of a social emotional component with a reflection journal each week. Our grade 10s is called the Empowerment Journal, and every week they look at a different, strength or a different word, something like optimism, or they will break down kindness or gratitude or accomplishment or zest, and they have to look for ways that they utilize that strength in their life or ways that they'd like to improve on that strength or how they recognize it in their peers or in their families. So there's endless, I think, possibilities to be able to incorporate it.
So is this something that kids do from pre-K onward? Is there a certain age when you kind of start to move into this with the strength survey and so on, or is it something that maybe is a little harder for the younger ones to grasp? I'm just wondering about the kind of the age.
No, thank you for that. The VIA strength survey, so it does have two different surveys. There's a youth survey, and I believe that one is for as young as 7 up to the age of 11, and then the adolescent and adult survey would start around the age of 12. The only issue that we've ever found while using it is that you do have to create a profile or a login. It's free, but depending on the age and the accessibility to having an email address, then those sometimes can just add a couple of barriers. But we have the students do it multiple times within each division. Doing it every year is a little too much, so you would want to make sure that you're spreading it out so it still becomes meaningful. But we do have our students kind of reflecting on it. I think in elementary school, a lot of what we would call of the character strengths, things like kindness and gratitude and perseverance, these are things that are happening every day. And so the conversation around them are happening quite a lot because as of course we know young people when they're first coming to school and they're working within a cohort of 20 individuals, they're sort of learning a lot of these soft skills daily. And then in middle school and high school, it's a little bit more explicitly taught within an advisory curriculum. And so we're doing the character strength survey. We might be doing goal setting or intention setting at the beginning of each semester. And we often will have the students think about a specific challenge that they know they're going to encounter, whether that's their time management, their balance, if it's their AP math class in high school that they're going to take. And so then we kind of talk to them, well, what's the strength that you're going to need and what are 3 strategies and how you can implement that strength? And then we'll reflect at the end of the year. So again, depending on the different divisions and grade levels, you kind of have to find great ways to engage them in it. Something that's been beautiful that we just did recently was an all-school kindness week. It was based off of the theme of Dr. Seuss, and we had our counselors did a fabulous job organizing it, but it was a great way to highlight one strength with the entire school engaging in advisory and wellness lessons. There were, every day there was something new at the gate, a sticker one day, a random act of kindness suggestion that you could pull out of the hat. There was opportunities to write kindness on petals that then we made these big flowers out of. So that was just like a beautiful all school, parents could be engaged, staff engaged, student engaged activity. And it really did. It brought a lot of kindness. Oh, we did a kindness rocks activity as well in our advisory program. So yes, those are some examples.
Well, you're giving me the warm fuzzies, and that's, very Seussical, and also it's a positive emotion that I'm feeling, and that gets me thinking about PERMA. So maybe you could help us unpack a little bit what each of the letters of PERMA, which is a positive psychology framework, what each of the letters stand for, and what might a student or staff member experience if they're working on one of these pillars?
Absolutely. When I finally was able to recite PERMA without having to look, I felt very, very accomplished, which is one of the pillars. But we start with P is positive emotions. And so positive emotions, experiencing positive feelings like joy, gratitude, contentment. Then we have engagement. And so engagement is being deeply involved and absorbed in activities that you enjoy. And this is really where you get into what we call flow state. I'm sure lots of the listeners have heard of this type of state, but when you're like deeply engrossed and you just completely lose all sense of time. I get that actually when I'm developing advisory lessons, which sounds a little bit nerdy, but I do. I absolutely love writing advisory lessons.
I'm just going to interrupt for 1 second. I get it when I'm editing podcast episodes. Woohoo!
I love that for you. Then we have relationships, obviously incredibly important since as humans we are relational beings. So having those strong and supportive connections with others, creating that sense of kind of belonging and community, especially within schools. Then we have meaning. So feeling that your life has a purpose and that you are making a difference. Some aspects of this is when you find your calling. So I believe that I have found my calling as an educator. And so I feel that I do have pretty deep meaning every single day. I'm very fortunate, very grateful for that. And then there's accomplishment. So setting goals, achieving them, feeling that sense of mastery and progress. And then the last one, which wasn't actually included in the original PERMA framework, Dr. Martin Seligman marketed out of, I think, UPenn, that was already mentioned, where positive psychology research really became more trendy and popular, but is then health. And so I think this is a huge pillar that needs so much attention, and I'm so grateful that they did add this in because health, of course, is taking care of your physical and your mental well-being. And I'm sure, Audrey, you can agree with me here that as PE teachers, this is such an important component and the thing that's often missed. And when we are overwhelmed and stressed, it is usually the thing that goes away. We stop sleeping well, eating well, we stop exercising. So this is such a really important one for our students, but also for faculty and really all community members in a school.
Absolutely.
And then if we look at the examples, so examples of how people would use the pillars, if I kind of more think and provide examples of like how we are actually using it within our wellness program, that might be more helpful kind of to our listeners. So one thing that we have tried in the high school, for many years I was the high school advisory curriculum coordinator, so I was really able to impact a lot of change within our high school program. We have a Thankful Thursday routine where at the beginning of each one of our advisory lessons, we have some type of gratitude prompt that students either write in a journal or at times we'll just be standing in a circle and we'll verbally share and trying to make that statement relate to the topic that we might be talking about that day. And that one's obviously really great for positive emotions. If we think about relationships, any kind of big community building activities, we have a couple here at our school, one being Family Fun Day that kicks off pretty early on in the year where all the families come out. There's tons of different booths of food, there's activities, games, clubs are providing lots of fun things. There's a dunk tank, there's a relay race, there's, all kinds of different things in a really fun way to engage with our community and to make deeper connections. Things like a house league system. We've just moved to our high school and our middle school are on the same house system. So we have 4 different houses, 4 different dragons, and people are competing for points. And we're doing middle school and high school off timetable days for the first time this year, where we're actually doing stuff with the middle school group as well. And next year they're going to add elementary, and it's going to be the cutest little thing to see like grade 2 dragons with like their grade 12 buddies and getting to do stuff together. So another fantastic example. Accomplishments, doing accomplishment Padlets at the end of semesters where people can share and everyone can share. Parents can share, our staff, faculty can share, our students can share, and then it's sent out to the entire community. For another great thing for emotions is creating those routines of check-ins, whether they're emotional check-ins using things like a mood meter or using, emojis, whatever it might be, or which bunny do you think you most relate to today, and then having 6 different options. Doing your goal setting, I think I already mentioned it, but goal setting and intention setting at the beginning of every, semester and year, that's pretty common in schools to do that, whether that's in a subject area or just in general in an advisory class. And then I think a big one for parents is running parent coffees. So if in advisory you're talking about, or your homeroom or your wellness block, wherever these things might be happening, or you're bringing in a consultant that might be running some professional development with teachers, that they're also running sessions with parents, and they're sharing common language, they're sharing activities, they're talking to parents about how they can support their child at home through these different pillars, also helping parents to understand the language of character strengths and getting them to think about where they're at as well.
Thank you for laying the foundation of positive psychology, and a couple terminology things we can add. As a counselor, we say all emotions are part of who we are, and we're kind of careful about calling some positive and some negative. So one thing that is a part of that program, I'm sure, is that positive emotions are great, but there are going to be times when we have fear. There are going to be times when we have anguish, and that's a part of being human. And then which character strengths are you going to dial up to potentially handle those emotions? You're sharing a lot of practical ways that the character strengths in the PERMA pillars are coming into the school culture. And you are describing an integrated approach, so that is very helpful. All right, now we kind of move on to what could be a whole separate podcast. How do you build this baby? And the point is, with wellness program development being a big trend in international schools, let's take a look at how to get a program started from a who, why, what, when, and how approach. And I know this is big, so we'll just skim it a little bit. So let's start off with who's involved, who are the stakeholders?
All of these questions seem so difficult to tackle. And the who really, like the easiest answer, if I wanted to be the most succinct I could be, I would just say everyone. Everyone in the school community is involved at some point and some stage. So when you're starting to think about implementing, or there's already probably a ton of amazing things happening at your school. And it's more just about bringing things out of silos and wanting to make things a little bit more intentional and sustainable, usually. So really with the who, the most important people are going to be in international schools especially, or really any schools, but there's some type of board, I'm sure. And then you've, of course, got your leadership team. And in my experience, when the board and the leadership team are the ones that are initiating the change, and they are the ones that are communicating the message that this is important and we want to make sustainable change, then that's when that change happens. And then kind of from there, you can sort of make your action steps, which I think we'll talk through a little bit later on, and finding your champions and potentially creating some leadership structures. But it really starts there. It starts with the most important stakeholders, and then it goes down from there. Of course, we need our teacher buy-in. We need our teachers to feel comfortable and competent to be able to teach, social emotional learning in different aspects or different areas, not just in advisory, but in their teachables. You need student input. You need student agency. You need parents to be on board. You need them to have a deep understanding of what it is you're doing and why you're doing it. So ultimately, it's really everyone. And then once you have a plan and you know where there might be gaps, then you might also then be including some different consultants who might need to come in. Examples that I've worked with really closely would be David Bott in the Wellbeing Distillery. You've also got, if you're looking at your health curriculum and your sexual health, Susie March is a great consultant for that. You've got the Institute for Social Emotional Learning, or IFSL, that I've been starting to work more with as a teacher resident. You've got belonging work is so involved in this as well. And someone I know that you've had on your podcast before, Dr. Derek Gay, who's fabulous and has been here and done work with our students and our faculty and our parents. So there's a lot of people involved. And again, more succinctly, it's everyone. It's everyone.
So I love that you've said it's everyone, and totally agree. It really has to be integrated into every aspect of your school program, school community. That's a terrific approach.
And on the topic of who, one thing that you mentioned off mic was looking at hiring practices and focusing on including a zest for wellness, if you might say, as part of your interviewing practices to look for people who really are wellness champions and try to hire more people like that as a way of keeping things going.
Absolutely.
I'm just wondering, back at the beginning, how did you get that initial buy-in? As you said, it really, although it in a lot of ways is already happening in different silos, as you said, you really do have to get buy-in from the top, the leadership team and the board. What are some strategies you use to get that going? Because I can imagine some schools are thinking about this. That really has to happen, I think, first. Would you agree with that? And how did you get that to happen?
No, I absolutely agree. And buy-in is such an important aspect of it. And right now there might be listeners who are just a teacher who's very passionate about wellness and are hoping to inflict change. And that 100% was me. And I had my limitations. And obviously, when you're a teacher, you have just time constraints and limitations, not only that you're not in a leadership position to be able to actually impact the change, but there are and can be a lot of barriers. So I think for me, it's starting small. So if you're one of those individuals that's not in a leadership position, but you're looking to want to try and impact some change or bring things forward to your leadership, finding yourself a little committee or a group, some other champions that feel the same way that you do. From there, taking some time to look at some data. And when we talk about the why, I'll share a little bit of data. But if you're able to share either global data, but if you have data from community surveys that your school has done and they have advertised the results that, students, parents, and teachers might have utilized, or you can even possibly run some of your own surveys with your students, but arming yourself with some data and reasons why this is important. And then also coming to the table with, so you would need to, of course, initiate a meeting with your leadership group and bring them what you're seeing that's happening in the school now, being able to provide some data about what's being shared, about why programs like this are important. And if you're also able to share what you know from some other schools and small things that they're doing and small steps, that can be really helpful. But honestly, I think once the data just becomes clear, or if there have been going to your counselors and saying, what are the trends right now, what's happening? I know that counselors, especially in schools, are saying that the uptick of self-harm, of suicidal ideation, of students coming in with depression and anxiety, students that need to access outside counseling for help. Your counselors could probably speak for hours and hours to leadership to say these are the things that are happening and this is why it's so important. So I know that's a long-winded way of just saying, collect some data, find some champions, have the meeting. And I really think that leaders are very open to listening to this now. In my experience, it was a shift in leadership. The stuff that I was doing for about the first 3 years was very siloed, and I could only really impact change within my division. And then once we had a change in leadership, and I had a meeting with that leader, and I brought forward certain issues and certain things that had happened that made that leader be very switched on and start to ask a lot more questions of a lot more people. And this leader had a lot of experience actually with positive education and implementing a program at her previous school. And so that allowed us to really start and impact change. And she made a wellness committee basically, and then that allowed us to start to make change, which obviously takes a lot of time. But that's where it initially started. I hope that answered your question, and I'm sorry that I kind of rambled a little bit there.
No, absolutely. That is super helpful. I think, I'm imagining myself back at one of the schools I had been at before and trying to put in some kind of program. That would be really helpful. And I like the idea of data, and that gets back to our interview with Chris Smith. And I'm also thinking that, David, you would probably say maybe have the board and the leadership team do kind of a book study of Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation. So
I would.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right. So when should schools start thinking about developing a wellness program?
Immediately. I mean, if it's not happening yet, I think that there's no time like the present to kind of dive into it and start to design it. Again, it takes a lot of time. So if you're just a school that's starting out, my biggest recommendation in all the experience that I've had and going to other schools and kind of seeing what they have done as well, you're going to get to a framework, but if you're able to take wellness and look at your current mission statement, your core values, your strategic plan, and if you can match what you want or find the language that you can, I don't want to say manipulate, but in a way make it work for you to justify why wellness is important. We were fortunate that within our mission statement, we were able to pull out a specific statement that related to wellness and its personal development. And then from there, then that allowed us to say to the board, all right, well, this is in our mission statement, so this is why now it's important. So we're going to put a bunch of backing and funding towards this so that we can make sure that wellness is going to be sustainable within our school. So when we think of when, start now. And then if we think of the how, then again, looking at how it can match to our strategic plan. So we just went through our accreditation, which if you're in an international school, you will know about this, right? You have to be accredited in order to provide certain curriculums and programs. And we were able to put wellness within one of our, strategic plan for our 2030 vision. We were able to use it through our WASC accreditation and be able to make sure that we were actually meeting the needs of our students and our community members within wellness. And so again, all of that just brings that buy-in. It brings it up for everybody. And again, that helps with the board and helps with the buy-in, the things that we've been talking about.
So let's merge the what and the how a little bit more, because I know you've got some structures that would need to be in place leadership-wise, and you mentioned maybe at certain divisional level having leaders in place. So what would the what of what some structures would look like, and maybe if there's any more how that you'd like to bring in?
Absolutely. So in terms of the what, so we talked about the connecting to strategic plan and the mission statement, core values, whatever it is that you use. If you don't have something yet, we also started when we first did our first round of looking at this, we started with our own well-being statements. And so things that we hoped for our students by the time that they graduated. And this really just helped actually lead us into realizing we already had something pretty great in our mission statement that we could utilize. But if you don't, you can always create your own. So once you've kind of made those connections, then it's important to start to build your team, right? And you might be building your team and then making those connections. So a wellness committee, or I know lots of schools have wellness committees, but you need ones that are specific in developing also the explicit curriculum that's going to be taught. Because wellness, in order to make sure that it's going to be sustainable and become the ethos and part of your school, you need leaders or middle-level leaders in place who are going to be developing curriculum, who are going to be trained, who are going to help to train teachers, right? We can't just say, oh, now everybody is an expert and tomorrow you are going to start this character education program. That's not how it works and how it happens. So we have to, again, we need to find a team of people. We need to upskill those individuals. So we have our grade level leads. I know in schools they can be called different things. We have deans of students that might be taking on part of this role. Ours are called personal development leaders because that's the terminology that relates to wellness from our mission statement. So we've got from EC all the way up to grade 12, we have a personal development leader. And then those individuals are going to be responsible for creating actual lesson plans. And then we have grade level teams of advisors, of course, teams of teachers in elementary division, all of the fifth grade teachers as an example. And so those teams are then given lots of time and professional development to help make them feel comfortable to teach students. And then once I feel comfortable, then I'm also able to bring it into the different areas of my actual teachables. So our math teachers still being able to run check-ins, to being able to feel comfortable to do, more social emotional competencies, being able to take the pulse of the room, make changes, help kids set goals, work with them on their time management, not just in advisory, but in our other courses kind of as well. And that's like a very, again, big picture. There's still so many granular steps to do within that, and having to pick curriculum and standards you're going to follow. If you're going to go with positive psychology, you may want to choose PERMA as a framework. You might want to choose CASTLE as a framework. That one's very common and used all around the world. Then you might need to have actual standards that you want to meet. UNESCO has great standards for our sexual health. You've got the child safeguarding. You're probably going to need to include standards there. ISCA, counseling standards. For PE, SHAPE standards, or OFIA standards. That's Canadian, Ontario. Probably digital citizenship standards as well. So your curriculum office is all going to be involved in this process. And then if you would like to have a resource to help you with lessons, we've been using the Positive Education Enhanced Curriculum, which is a full curriculum with actual lessons and activities, which is phenomenal, because I know that can be a big barrier for schools, is where do we get these lessons and how do we create these lessons? And then we don't have time to make lessons. And so finding something that's already done really well that you can just take and adapt and modify to your context in your building. So we use that curriculum, and there's a cost that we pay for it every year, but it's been a huge resource, hugely beneficial to us. And then, of course, like I said before, having professional consultants to come in to actually help teachers. So the positive education model is that you learn it, you live it, you embed it, and then you teach it. And so if you follow kind of that framework, you're really learning it as a school. You're asking your teachers to start living the PERMA pillars and the framework for themselves. Then you are starting to embed it into the ethos of your curriculum, and then you are starting to actually teach it to the students. So it can be a very long process if you want to be very intentional and sustainable about it.
So, as I said before, we had Chris Smith on the program at one stage, and he had me falling in love with data. So I'm going to bring it back to the data. And another trend that's going on in international schools right now is using data to help with lots of aspects of running a school and keeping your finger on the pulse of how things are going. So I'm wondering what you're learning and possibly hearing about how schools are measuring the effectiveness of their wellness programs for students, staff, and even parents.
I think that most schools are starting to create, we're surveyed to death a little bit in schools, but you want to hear the information, and the best way to get it is to create a survey. So I know Google surveys are often used in schools that are using Google. We had an in-house wellness sort of survey, like you said, to take the pulse. It was literally called Taking the Pulse for our students, just to check in on them, to see where they were with their mental and physical health and things around sleep and nutrition and stuff as well, to see if there was anything that we were missing, especially to help us with either specific lessons for grade levels or just looking for any trends. So we started to do that for a few years. And then now as a school, there are more organizations, I think, out there that are starting to create these universal screeners. Other schools, I've heard they are using the PERMA Wellbeing Survey, which is another organization and that relates to all the PERMA pillars. So if you're using that as a curriculum, it's actually a great survey to do. And you can, I think, purchase rights. The survey can go all the way down through elementary, and it goes through all of the pillars. And so once I finish the survey, it will give me a well-being plan based off of my responses. It might say that the 3 pillars that I am lower in or that I might want to focus on are accomplishments, and then it will give me some strategies on how I can do that in my daily life. So that's a really great survey. We chose to go a different way. We're using the Resident Education Behavioral Screener, and this is our first year, but the hope is that as we continue to use this survey year after year, we'll be able to see actual trends, and we'll have more in-house data to help us to see if the programs that we are implementing are actually making changes, which we don't really know. And so this survey, the student fills it out, but so does a teacher that knows that student. That's either their advisor or they are teaching that student. And we do the survey twice a year. So we've already done one round of the survey. And after we completed the survey, we were able to look at the results and we were able to identify some very specific areas that our students seem to be struggling in. And then we created some lessons in January to sort of help our students. As an example of this, in grade 12, I'm working within our grade 12 team. Their self-awareness and their ability to ask for help was an issue for them. And also letting someone know when they have a problem. So we were able to identify that and then just have really an open-ended conversation using an activity called a snowball, where kids were anonymously responding to questions, which took a bit of the fear away. And then we were kind of able to talk about it and provide empathy and advice. So it's already worked really well, which I love. Teachers can really easily access the data and then already think about ways that they can implement. Also for advisory programs, I think it's still really important. We do a yearly, again, it's just a Google survey, but we ask our students how they felt all the topics in the lessons were. Were they practical? Were they connected to their life? Did they see meaning in it? And really, what are their suggestions on how to improve the program? And we also run the same survey with our teachers. And we run the same survey with our middle school and our high school teachers as well. So we can kind of look at data and trends within both programs. And the biggest thing that kept coming up for us was that we weren't providing enough professional development to make teachers feel safe and to feel comfortable. And that's what your data can help you with, is really assessing the pulse of students, yes, but then also teachers. One last thing, I know I've given a lot, but I know that schools will run community surveys with parents, with teachers, and even with students. And I know other schools I've also heard doing this. We did it as well, but we've now changed a lot of our questions to relate to, I feel like I have a trusted adult. I feel like I belong within the community. I feel like our peer group trusts each other. Like, just the questions we're asking are now really more changing about that more holistic feeling that kids are getting within the community.
So what's jumping out at me is that more and more organizations are coming up with tools to help.
Absolutely.
So when I was in the field, I developed a wellness plan template for elementary students and a wellness toolkit, just like you were saying earlier, which character strengths and perma pillars are going to help me in which situation. Yet, that was a very difficult template to scaffold for different age groups. Mm-hmm. So the idea that there are professionals out there that are coming up with algorithms of questions that can help students do that, and let's say it gets 80% of the job done, and then that student is potentially working with the teacher, and then they can massage it and get it up to 90-95%. That's super powerful. So that sounds, again, very practical. And one of the things you just mentioned was something that I heard a lot of at my last school when the school was starting off with the wellness program or the beginning stages, teachers feeling out of their comfort zone. We're getting into social emotional development. How are we going to handle this? And that was a bit of a stumbling block. And one of the answers, as you said, is to provide professional development, but also peer coaching. There are a lot of different ways that we can help each other. Yet in the end, more than ever in our age, especially with digital wellness, our students really need us. Parents are overwhelmed with what's happening in the digital world. And in my country, not Canada, sadly, I'm from the U.S., all the things that are happening in the news that make life very difficult for young people trying to figure out what's right, what's wrong, all that. So school is a bastion for hope, and your school sounds like they're doing a great job of building that scaffolding to help with that personal development. So kudos there. All right, let's move on. And Alison, you were just knocking the ball out of the ballpark here. I'm so appreciating so much that you're sharing. Let's take a broad look, but then step down into each division of a school, from primary to middle to high school. And let's take a look at what student learning sessions might look like. What are some primary topics that you're covering, your school's covering in the elementary, middle, high school? What might they look like? Maybe give us one or two examples for each division involving character strengths and the PERMA framework.
All right, beautiful. So in my experience, kind of the best combination about how this might all be happening, right, is you have an explicit block where this teaching is happening. And then, like we've been talking about before, is that then it just becomes part of what you do as a teacher. I run check-ins just like I do an advisory in my math class and in my English class and whatnot. So for leaders out there, when you're thinking about how you're going to create that time and space, we need to have a block. We need to have something longer than just a 15-minute homeroom check-in. There needs to be an extended period of time. So currently, the model that we're using in elementary is they have one wellness block every week for 30 minutes. Now, they haven't had any time dedicated specifically to this before, so one day a week, 30 minutes is pretty good. It could definitely be a little bit better and a little bit more, but that's a great starting point. And then in our middle school and our high school, we get twice a week for 30 minutes. So kind of totaling an hour. So this provides the time and space, and then they're within an advisory cohort that they stay with in the high school starting in grade 9, and they stay with their teacher and they move up together through the grades. So we're really developing a good foundation and relationship. That's obviously very important. Before we can get into the specifics about curriculum, we have to have those safe and trusting environments. So building those relationships, that perma pillar is so incredibly important kind of in the beginning, and a lot of that has to be done through kind of organic conversations and activities and nothing that's really forced. And so teachers need the opportunity to buy in at the level they can be at and what they're comfortable with, and sort of creating those nice safe spaces. Maybe there's a bank of resources that they can go to, and then they can choose the ones that are comfortable to them. So once we have good relationships and foundation, and I think in all divisions, that's where this always starts. So you're really spending your first couple of months within there. And then what I think is important about your programs is that there should actually be common themes and trends throughout every single division. So if we're talking about, as an example, transitions is a big theme that we talk about in advisory. Well, that transition from grade 5 to grade 6 is huge. And so how can we prepare kids really well through these advisory or wellness blocks to make them feel comfortable transitioning there? Transitioning from grade 8 to grade 9 is a huge transition, and we spend lots of time. Our student leaders will come down and they run a step-up day where the students are, invited to come. They get to do some activities with the high school. They get to meet the teacher. They do a tour. There's, again, ways to help them feel comfortable. Our grade 12s transitioning out to go to college and university, and what does that look like? So finding themes and then finding age-appropriate activities and lessons that are different and that engage in the theme in a different way is really important. So some other ones that we see, completely throughout are gratitude, obviously using our character strengths, those relationship buildings, the dedicated service, the belonging, the goal setting, how to manage and regulate our emotions. Of course, that looks different when you're doing it with elementary students, doing the thing of talking about the analogy of flipping the lid, or, just how do we actually identify and name emotions? Well, actually, our high school kids need that too. They need a lot of help identifying their emotions, but in grade 9, we start having a little bit more open conversations with students sitting in a circle and actually talking about current emotions and feelings and things that are going on for them using some I statements as an example. So yeah, again, we are using the Positive Education Enhanced curriculum as a guide, which then of course helps us that a lot of our units are based off of PERMA and that we're seeing them in all divisions as we move throughout, but the activities and again the way we engage with it is a little bit different.
So am I correct? Your approach seems to be that, especially in the elementary, you're teaching the character strengths, you're teaching PERMA, appropriate to which grade, and then much of the positive education curriculum, or a portion, is scenario-based, that they are put in scenarios, and then the question gets into, you're going to reach into your toolbox, your wellness toolbox or toolkit. How are you going to approach that? And am I getting that correct?
Absolutely. That is a lot about how the lessons and the material goes. Not, of course, all of the time. We also have to be, and, all schools need to be responsive. We need to be responsive to what's happening. We were dealing with an issue within our high school with some bullying not just online, but also within the school. And we recognized that there weren't a lot of students who felt comfortable to sort of speak up, or that upstander kind of theme. And so we were able to kind of just take a pause, and then we really needed to go and we needed to lean into that. And so in theory, there's this beautiful, scope and sequence that you would follow, but there's always going to be a cultural context. There's always going to be something that we need to deal with in the moment that's going to kind of take us a little bit here and there and off course. And then health is another really big component, and depending on what structures your school has in place. Now, for us here, our explicit health teaching has been actually happening through our advisory. And in our high school, we were teaching sexual health, drugs and alcohol right within our advisory program. We've taken the sexual health part out. It's gone into PE, but only as a Band-Aid until we actually have a health teacher next year. And the students are going to be learning this now in a health class. So that actually has been taking up a big chunk of our advisory program, but now we're moving a little bit more back into kind of the pillars. And a lot of time management, we have to do that. Our kids are constant procrastinators. Our digital citizenship, like you were saying, with the data that's coming out about the anxious generation, we have to spend a lot of time helping students to develop coping strategies so that they can, continue to be productive and to not fall into some of our negative trends around social media, but also using it for the positive ways.
This has been an insanely informative, deep dive into how one school implemented a positive psychology-focused wellness program. Thank you so much for all the detail, and you really clearly have a lot of experience with this and have thought deeply about it and have worked with all the different partners at all the different levels. And, it's a very thorough approach. It's wonderful. What are some lessons that you've learned having gone through this process that you might like to share with our audience?
Oh, I learned so many. I have been working in it for a long time, so a bit more context. About 9 years I've been on this journey to kind of help redevelop, recreate, redefine, and going towards sustainability within kind of wellness and well-being. So I think for me, as I mentioned before, is that I was really only able to impact change within the high school, within the first little bit, until we had a change in leadership, which allowed for a bigger change in direction. So, I think my biggest recommendation is that we do need to get it out of the silos, and instead of allowing kind of one division to go forth and start to make changes, it really needs to be that whole school. We need to get that buy-in, as we've talked about, from the board, from the leadership, and so that it's coming top down and that everyone is moving at the same speed at the same time so that all students are getting the benefit from it. The connection to the mission and values, I just think, is huge, because once that happened and then it was able to link within the strategic plan, now no matter who out there wants to come at you and say, like, well, why are you doing that? It's just such a simple answer. Oh, well, it's part of our strategic plan. And that just makes it justifiable, and that you can then get out of the weeds and just move forward. One protocol that I find really, really helpful for this, and whether you bring someone in to facilitate it, or, your curriculum leader facilitates it, or your head of school with whatever party, but you do, it's called a futures protocol. And many people might already be very familiar with this and familiar with the structure, but essentially just taking your group of leaders that are going to be developing lessons, or your whole school even together, your whole division, but having everybody kind of sit and move forward 5 years to think about what the school community could kind of look like, sound like, or feel like if wellness was a thriving thing within your community, or well-being was a sustainable thing, however you approach the question. And, then from there, everybody takes basically what they've noticed, and then you bring it back, you gather all of the data, the information, you try and find the common themes and trends, and then from there you can really start to say, okay, well, this is what we want, this is where we're at, and then now in the middle we fill in some of those action steps, because it is important to audit, it is important to know what we already have, because like we've said, lots of great things are probably happening and could be happening in silos, that then we can just take those people and have them maybe come and be the champions to educate everyone on how to do these things, and then we're building capacity for everyone. So a futures protocol, again, really helpful, getting that very clear vision of where you want to go, and then you can start to figure out and resource what you need to do next. The professional development for teachers, this to me is another incredibly important one. So for anyone out there that's a leader that is able to work with the budget, and you can find the budget and you can afford consultants, bring people in. That's not to say that you don't have wellness champions at your school, that you can't just send out for PD that can't come back and also then help to upskill everybody within your building. But there needs to be some upskilling that happens, and in a good, formalized, intentional, and very visible way. And when you have consultants that come in, some ones that I previously mentioned, if they can also work with your student groups and your parent group, again, it just helps to bring everybody again on board on why, and showing that this is incredibly important. And then continuing that modeling. So we've had IPSL, the Institute for Social and Emotional Learning, that came in recently. They were helping to upskill teachers around these routines of check-ins and then doing what's called an open session. And we've continued to have the conversation. In other professional, like we have Wednesday PD meetings. In those Wednesday meetings, we've had more check-ins modeled. We've been given opportunities to practice as teachers. And then we are, again, modeling how to do an open session and practicing in a fishbowl formation as teachers. So the more your teachers have things modeled to them by leaders or by these wellness champions and get opportunities to actually practice, the better they're going to be. It can't be I sit and get a consultant and then I'm expected to now just go and make change. That does not happen, and it is not sustainable. So we have to PD, we have to model, and we have to practice. And the practice always gets missed. We just assume that educators, because we're educators, should already know what to do. And we don't. We need time. And time, I know, is so hard to get around wellness, but we need a lot more of it. A couple other things just to mention is really creating that middle level leader structure and having it be so that there again is time. So we're developing those middle level leaders. Again, at our school, we're calling them personal development leaders. We have one per grade level. And those leaders are being upskilled in their leadership as well as upskilled in the social emotional competencies. And then those leaders are responsible for their grade level teams. And those grade level teams are given time. Every 6 weeks, they have one of these Wednesday PD meeting times where they get to review lessons. So the lessons are already developed in advance. As I come to this meeting, if I'm an advisor, I come in and I can see what's expected of me for the next 6 weeks. We can model activities together. We can talk about lessons. We can make sure that everybody, again, is comfortable and confident. And when we made that change to actually giving time for our advisory teachers, the buy-in increased so much because it wasn't an hour before advisory, I'm suddenly getting a lesson. Now I'm expected to teach it, and I don't even understand the lesson or what's happening. I haven't been given the time to really absorb it. So we have to give teachers that time. So that's helped huge in our program and helping our teachers feel comfortable. And then parents, I think we need to partner a little bit more with parents. This is still actually an area of improvement, I think, for our school, especially in international schools when you have a lot of different cultural backgrounds together, really tapping into the parents to understand what are maybe some of the nuances or what are the things that you really value within your culture that you're already doing that are maybe already wellness-related things, like some cultures already have habits of, meditating or gratitude already built in, and how can we tap into that and help highlight that or lean into those cultural groups to help teach others. And so I think that's just there's a wealth of knowledge there that we don't often go to enough. And same with our students. Just when we've had opportunities to bring students in and get their voice on lessons, even having them preview lessons or having them even teach some lessons, it's just so meaningful and so powerful. And we've done that through advisory reps. So each year in the advisory, you get to nominate someone or someone can nominate themselves that they want to be an advisory rep. And it becomes another leadership position for them. But then those students can meet with our personal development leaders and they can say, all right, we're going to do the topic of recently, I know we just did one on drugs. We're going to talk about drugs. And so what is it what's important in this cohort and in this grade level, in this context at this time? What are some things that you want to do or you need to know? And again, just hugely powerful. Buy-in, again, increases. And when the kids know, your classmate said this was important to you, then they're like, oh, okay, we'll be more engaged.
There's so much that you just shared there. I can't summarize it all. A few of the ideas really resonate with me. the idea of being sustainable, and we're going to have Dr. Jim Reese on about the process of bringing about change, and that's how you started your discussion. This is change. This is big-time change. And how do you go through all the steps, and how do you make it sustainable? That is awesome. You provided a real blueprint for folks to start grasping all that goes into this process. You're bringing on all the stakeholders that are possible. And what I could see at your school, once it's kind of flourishing in its current effort, is to further have outreach to those parents who really, in general, when I was a counselor in this part of the world, wanted help. And the idea to help them do wellness plans, to help them write family mission statements, to help them write digital wellness plans as families. And one of the key terms you're using is values. What are their family values? And from those values, develop plans and such. So it sounds like that's going to be in the future. So one thing I'll share as an instructional coach for technology is that lean into your instructional coaches, especially if you're trying to integrate into your regular curriculum. These folks are the pros. That's what they do. And a model that you can use is the TPAC model. So all the people that have been around for a long time in technology, that's what we've used when we first introduced how to integrate technology into the curriculum. So instead of the T for TPAC, think of W. How can you be integrating wellness into the pedagogy, into the curriculum, into your whole lesson planning system? I'll throw in, I've done a lot of work since I retired on elementary school wellness integration, and I've got a wellness site. It's over-scaffolded. It's filled with too much information. I know it. But it will be in the show notes, and it's a very integrative model. Once the students learn the character strengths and PERMA, then it gets into how do teachers bring it into science, math, history, and all that. All right, with all that said, what else would you like to share, our wellness guru? And man, people need to contact you, Alison, and learn more. And we'll get to that in just a second.
Thank you for saying that. I hope that people will contact me. I have so much to say, and I feel like there's so much more that I could share. And you just saying there's a couple last things. I don't know. I don't even know if I've done it justice to really lean into exactly how you can implement and make change. But I know one big thing, and just for a plug, having been in the roles of grade 9 dean before, advisory curriculum coordinator, and all these things, that compensation is really important. It's hard. It's really difficult to create fun and meaningful lessons around, these competencies of, growth mindset or how we control our emotions. And it takes a long time to develop these lessons. So compensating with time, compensating with actual money and resources is incredibly important. We need those middle level leaders, and you want them to stay, and you want them to feel really valued in what they're doing, because this is such an important part. And we know that it's a holistic approach, right? We know that for individuals, we don't need the data, although the data is there and it's screaming at us on how important it is for us to be able to take care of our social and emotional health. But we know that people that are struggling and that are unwell, they cannot engage in just everyday tasks, right? That teacher that's dealing with depression, they can't show up for their students in the best way. And when they don't have the tools, or they don't have the confidence that they can take time off, or they don't have any time off, or whatever it is, like they can't be their best version. And then that really impacts the students and the learning. On the other side, if we have a student that's struggling with their parents are getting divorced, and there's this very volatile home environment, and they're really struggling with their peer group or whatever it might be, they can't go into that math class and actually access the information. And so being able to recognize when students need us, being able to instill in them that they have a trusted adult, they know how to ask for help, they know where to go, they have their toolbox that they can lean on. Like, these things are just so incredibly important. And that, again, that can come back to our why. And really leaning in when we're not well, we can't do what is asked of us. And so we have to focus on it. It has to become equally as important as math, which sounds crazy, I know. But it shouldn't be, we have academics on the high point of the pillar and we have what's personally developed lower on. They need to be equal. They are the same. They should be the same. We are human. We need to be in the right state of mind to do all of this learning, all of this teaching, all of this everything. And I know that there are probably, again, people that are out there that might just be, you might be teachers, you might be leaders, and you might just be thinking, well, I just need some resources. Like a lot of this was good information. Maybe you were even trying to take notes and you were like, I don't even know what that girl said. But for resources, I have in the past at conferences done pre-conferences on how to implement well-being plans in international schools. So I do have a Google folder just full of different resources. Probably the gold inside this folder would be, there's a document that is links to different websites. And so I have websites that are for your big picture frameworks, websites for curriculum resources, and then curriculum resources all the way down to more minute things and topics and things that you would use in advisory, as well links to different standards that you may want to use. There's a lot of gold in there. There are also resources for helping you with your buy-in pitches that you might need to do. So I'll make sure that I share that. And if you are looking for conferences, if you happen to be in the Asia area, there is an organization through 21st Century Learning that's called PHASE. And so that is the Physical Education and Health Conference. It happens in November every year, but we are moving a lot more to wellness and health. It's kind of one of the pillars. So if you are a health teacher or you are just a wellness champion, there's probably definitely something that you could engage in to do. There's also great organization, IFSL. I've given a little plug for them as well because I'm also consulting and working with them a little bit. But the Institute for Social Emotional Learning, they are based out of the States. They have a ton of online courses that you can take. They also have summer institutes. And if you're an advisory teacher and you're like, hey, I want to be better at being an advisory teacher, or I'm a grade level dean or leader, then great courses for you to take. So you can check out their website. I think we'll also put that into the show notes. And always, little plug, you could reach out to me. I am, after many years, I am willing to, with all the experience that I have, to come to your school to help you with your futures protocol, to help you with your audit. I'd be more than happy to have some conversations with you about what's going on and what resources or what help you might need. So shameless plug, sorry.
You go, girl. I mean, really, reinvent the wheel or see about getting Alison to come to your school. You know, not that tough a choice. So if our listeners wanted to follow you and what you're doing, if they want to learn more about implementing a positive psychology-based school wellness program, are there any places where maybe they could go to get more of you?
On Twitter, you can definitely follow or reach out to me. I'm at P.E. Leathwood. And then on LinkedIn, my profile is under Alison Leathwood.
We'll have that in the show notes too. So absolutely.
All right. Time to bring our wellness learning session to a close. It's been filled with so many practical insights and ways to go deep. And as I was just saying a few minutes ago, make your program sustainable. And as we've said many times on our podcast, our students, our staff, our parents really need support, life skills, social and emotional learning to deal with struggles and what's coming at them, but also getting back to the very start of what Alison said, for those that life at the moment's going pretty well and you want to go to the next step. You want to thrive. You want to engage those various character strengths. You want to engage them within the PERMA pillars. And so here we're offering a blueprint, an approach, and an individual, in this case Alison, who I haven't mentioned, I know well, and that's why we got her on the show. I know she would come on and knock my socks off. And she has. So, Alison, thank you so much for taking the time. You are not a rising star. You are a star. So thank you for being a part of this chat.
Thank you so much again for having me. That's very kind words. I feel like I learned a lot from you, though, so that you were incredibly helpful to continue my passion. And I am just really passionate about this. And ultimately, I just want to help people. I want to help schools. I want to help individuals. But really, I want to, of course, help students because that's why we're in this profession. And to really help them to thrive and have the tools that they need to live an amazing and incredible life.
Yeah.
This has been a wonderful deep dive into wellness, which we're all totally into. So it's great to geek out with you. Thank you so much, Alison.
Thank you for joining us today on Educators Going Global.
You can find this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, and all the other usual suspects.
Please subscribe, like us, and leave a review on Apple and Spotify. And let your teaching friends know about us so we can grow our community.
Please reach out at educatorsgoingglobal@gmail.com and join our Facebook group, Educators Going Global, if you have ideas, comments, or wish to share a Going Global story of your own.
You can also find us on Instagram at Educators Going Global.
Please visit our website as well, www.educatorsgoingglobal.com. All our podcast episodes are on there by topic, along with blog posts, Going Global stories, and our ever-growing resource library. For now, this is Audrey
and David
inviting you to travel,
teach,
and connect with us.